everyone, I'm SlainKnightly, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about combat in Thea the Awakening. So as you can see here, my party seems to have gotten itself surrounded by quite a few creatures that want to kill him. So I'm going to end my turn here, and we'll see if hopefully they attack. Yep, here we go. So combat in Thea is a bit strange, but I'm going to try and do my best here to describe how this works. So you have basically two different stacks of cards. You have your main cards that you can play right away in combat to attack the enemy, and then you have the secondary cards, which in each of these cards represents a character. And these secondary cards, they they can be brought into combat by using the Get Closer, but they're going to end up missing their first turn. So a lot of times you'll want to instead use their special abilities. And all of these traits and special abilities come from the actual stats that the character has. So to start with, I'm going to just go ahead and play this guy, or gal. And then the enemy will play his turn. Now you can see these question marks here. This show you that this person cannot actually act. And this is because he deployed him here from his right side using the Get Closer command, which causes them to start confused, so they won't be able to attack on their first turn. So in this case, I can go ahead and play, I'll go ahead and play her. And I'll play him as well. Now this is actually a really easy combat, so it shouldn't be any difficulty here. Now one interesting thing to note is you see here like where this guy has a sword icon, and so does this guy. This little hammer icon means that this character is using a blunt attack. So any damage, as you can see if you hover over here, will carry on to a second opponent. So if he does the 18 damage to kill this guy, which obviously it will since he only has 3 health, it'll carry on to hit the next target as well. So that's an important thing to note, the special abilities. And that's an example of using a special ability. He used first action to get this character to start right in the front of the combat queue. And I am going to go ahead and use first action on my character. And any character cards that you use to as a special ability will not show up here on the battlefield. They instead go to the corner here. So they won't actually participate in the battle. However, they can still be killed. So like if I go ahead and kill all of these other bats, then and I still have another attack, it will go ahead and attack his back row. And in this case, it doesn't matter. We should be able to easily defeat all of these units. So I will go ahead and deploy them, rest them here, get closer, so they'll miss their first turn, but it shouldn't matter in this case. And combat always consists of 2 combat rounds, assuming it lasts for 2 rounds. So after that, then any surviving cards will be put back into your hands, which in this case was obviously unnecessary since I was just murdering bats. Another important thing to know about the combat system is that it is not just used for combat in the game. It is used to resolve any kind of challenge in the game. So if, for example, a social challenge, if you're trying to convince somebody to join your expedition, or you would use a speech challenge. So if you can look at their stats, and a good way to do this is if you right-click on a character, you'll be able to see their stats and hover over them for a lot of detail here. So for example, a speech challenge, or social challenge as the game calls it, would be using the speech skill basically instead of their damage. Likewise, you would have will instead of defense. So it's important to keep in mind that any kind of challenge in the game will be using that same card system as I just showed you earlier. And that the same elements apply. Basically, the only real difference between a social challenge, for example, and a combat challenge is that if you lose, basically your characters don't take physical damage. so they wouldn't lose actual hit points for failing a social challenge, because that wouldn't make any sense at all. And there are other challenges besides social and physical. There are some spellcasting type ones, um, or hex, I guess. And then there's some also used for hunting challenges. So different types of challenges will use different skills. However, they all function the same way using that sort of card game system that you saw earlier. Like here, you can see somebody using their folklore and intellect in a hex challenge. So it's good to keep in mind that all of these skills are used to determine what their stats are for the actual card game combat, and that system is used for resolving any kind of challenge in the game. So during that combat we saw earlier, we discussed blunt damage and how it allowed you to attack or damage multiple characters, and then of course the standard attacks. So I also wanted to cover how piercing attacks work, and also poison. So if you see here, this character has the staff here which does piercing damage and 2 poison damage. So if I right click on her, I can scroll and look at what these exactly do. So what piercing damage does, and you'll see, instead of that little hammer icon or the sword icon, it'll have this little spear arrowhead type icon in the actual battle itself. So what this does is it allows you to basically skip ahead of the last enemy card that was played. So this card will actually move in front of the last enemy card to have been played. So piercing damage kind of allows you to respond to what your enemy is placing and say, oh, actually, I would like to, the enemy deployed somebody a lot stronger than I expected, so I want to play additional damage to try and kill it. Or, you might want to just save your piercing ones to be the last person on your side to spawn, and then just be able to deploy him in front of the enemy. And also poison damage. So what this does is it actually does twice the damage if the target creature is already wounded. So here, for example, I would do 4 damage to the enemy target if he was already wounded instead of just the 2 damage. And also I wanted to mention ranged combat. So this doesn't, or ranged damage, it doesn't actually affect like actual damage in combat. Like if you deploy this guy to attack somebody, ranged damage will not do anything. Instead, what it does is it gives you additional abilities during combat. So as I had mentioned earlier, not all situations will necessarily lead to combat. So if, for example, here I can use the hunting skill, and it will go ahead and it will start a challenge similar to how the combat system works. Except that you will be using different skills here. And like in this case, you can see this character actually has no way to cause damage using their hunting skill. They have no hunting skill at all, so this person actually cannot actually do any damage to help in this challenge. This character actually has nothing they can do at all. So also related to combat, I wanted to discuss how wounds and injuries affect our work in the game. So just if your character has their hit points here, like this guy has 11 of 11, you can see there at the bottom. So even if you reach 0 health here, like you see this guy's at 0 of 16, they don't immediately die. Instead, if you hover over this, it'll say he's heavily wounded and may die. So basically, if they're low on health, they have a chance of dying every single turn. So he might survive his injuries despite having gone to 0 health and recover and be totally fine, or he could just keel over and die at the end of the next turn. So it's not a guaranteed death if your character reaches 0 hit points, but be aware that characters can be killed um, basically somewhat randomly at the end of the turn if they're very low on health. So I think that covers most of the actual combat basics. Now I could kind of go into more detail, like actual different strategies and things you might want to try, but I think I'll go ahead and save that, and we'll just go ahead and just fight another simple battle here. So if you have any questions or want anything else to be covered, then go ahead and post it in the comments below the video, and I will try and cover it if possibly in another video with more details about different actual strategic things you might want to do in combat. And actually, while I'm covering this, though, I will go over. So here you can see this is armor or shield. So that way it'll actually add this 5 health above his health. That way he won't actually take that damage on the field, on the actual game map. So he has like 5 points of armor. That will just be perfectly fine if he takes 5 or less damage. In this case, I want to confuse this wolf so he doesn't end up damaging me. And they're confusing me, which is fine because I have more people than he does. And then also, yeah, so there's many effects, like I discussed poison earlier. Here, this character actually has leech, which allows them to actually gain life when damaging opponents. And I guess I might as well kind of cover some of these abilities. So I use Confuse to basically just cause them to have the same effect as if I had deployed this character from Get Closer. Like this just causes them to have these question marks here. It basically just causes them to skip their first turn, so they can't do anything. Likewise, then you have Shield Ally, which will give these armor points. Like you see that +5 here. That's because of that 5 armor that character had. So in this case, I could give this character here, the one that's Dobresklavla, 11 armor, the same way as if they had that armor. So I mean that's a huge amount of armor. In this case, it's not necessary. Likewise, you can do Support Ally to give your character the bonus attack damage, so that way they'd have a +7 to their damage here. Which that obviously can be combined nicely with, for example, a blunt weapon, which they tend not to do as much damage, but they have the effect where they can hit multiple characters if they have increased damage carrying over. So a lot of times Support Ally can be useful because then it'll give your buff, on basically 2 attacks. And then of course to get closer to actually get into the combat. And then I had used, so Counter Tactic actually allows you to discard a card from the character's hand if it's lower than whatever your Counter Tactics is. So in this case here, these are level 3 wolves, so I couldn't use my level 2 ability even if I'd wanted. But if this was level 3 or higher, then I could have played this early on and just caused him to basically have to discard one of his cards immediately. And then we had already used first action in a previous battle. This just moves your character to the front of the queue. So I will go ahead and do this here to move her up to the very front. And so we should have no problem at all killing these wolves. So like I said, if you have any questions or comments, obviously post them below in the comments and I will try to answer them as best I can. And if you would like to see more combat, or just you would like an actual Let's Play of the game, then leave that in the comments below the video, and I will keep it in mind. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, or if you found the information useful, then please give the video a like. That helps me out a lot, and subscribe if you enjoy this channel. Thank you.